subscribing, and leaving comments.
Coming up right after Cindy, see the evidence and hear the screams that local people say could only come from Bigfoot.
And the next thing I knew, all fury broke loose, and this big black hairy thing came rolling down the hillside.
What was the giant creature that chased a Seattle man up a mountain near Darrington? Coming up next, details of his encounter with the creature he says was Bigfoot and how he barely escaped. Plus, local people who say they've seen the Northwest equivalent of the Loch Ness Monster. Stay with us. He's monstrous in the head and in size. He's hairy from head to toe. He's got a foul odor. Tinseltown loves him anyway. He's even inspired this movie, Harry and the Hendersons. That's the Hollywood version of Bigfoot. For many of us, the only Sasquatch sightings we've seen, you go to these at the Sonic games. But that's not the case with today's guest. Skip Hornbach is still haunted by a huge creature he says he saw in nearby woods.
Betty Unger says Bigfoot made her ski trip unforgettable. Daniel Perez is known around the country for his Sasquatch sleuthing.
And Sally Newberry will play for us what she claims are actual taped screams of Sasquatch. And Stephen Harvey, sitting next to her, says he had a Bigfoot encounter as well. In fact, this is such a big deal. You've organized a huge symposium this weekend with scientists, eyewitnesses, enthusiasts from around the world just to focus on Sasquatch.
And today, this is interesting, even a museum dedicated just to Sasquatch it is opening up.
In California somewhere.
So there are a lot of believers, but there are a lot of skeptics out there. And so, Skip, I want to begin with you because you had an experience that has haunted you for a lot of years. Why don't you tell? This is in the woods near Darrington, right near here.
In the woods near Darrington. I was out staking a mine claim, and in the process of staking a claim, you always make sure that you're in the right area and that you aren't claim jumping on someone. And I heard a pounding coming from the hill above me, and I suspected that there was some other miner out there, and I wanted to find out who it was. Well, when I hollered up the hillside, "Hey, you on the hillside just exploded in a fury, and this big, black, hairy thing came rolling down the hill toward me.
Hang on a second here. So this big black thing comes toward you. Now, since that time, I mean, what's that done to you? Do you have nightmares about this? What do you think?
I had nightmares for 3 years. I had real sleeping problems, and finally my wife convinced me that I should get a hold of some researchers and talk to them about it and see if I could get some kind of settlement to the whole thing to where I could live with it.
Now, I got to admit, I got some trouble with this. I'm not so sure. So why don't you take us back right from the beginning, real slowly, and let us know what it is exactly you heard.
Because it's not that we doubt that you're telling the truth, it's that you doubt that this is really Sasquatch. Is this an ape in the woods, or what did you see?
Some noise or something else?
So help us a little bit in terms of recounting what you heard at the very beginning. You're in the cave with your father.
I was in the mining tunnel, and I left my family members behind. They got tired of hiking. They wanted to go back to the vehicle, so they left, and I continued on up the hillside with a mining monument in my hands. And I got to an area where the trees were all broken over a very clean trail that had been clean, like a well-hiked trail, just a few weeks ago.
Then this is some of the home footage that you took after the experience. You went back later and you retraced your steps. These are the bent trees that you saw?
Those are approximately 5 inches in diameter, and those trees were bent over 3 and 4 feet above the ground.
But they're not cracked, they're just bent.
They're bent over. And I found this area. It was about a 60-foot wide swath that went 600 feet up the hillside of bent trees like that.
And there's stuff on the trees too, right?
There was a green, slimy type substance on the trees that looked a lot like green tapioca pudding. And I dug through it with a stick to see what exactly it was, and it was so unusual.
Because it's not sap, right?
No, it's not sap. It was so unusual, I tried to find an explanation for that, and then
Did it have an odor?
No, no odor at all.
Now, Daniel, you've been into Sasquatch and Bigfoot and investigating this kind of thing since you were 10 years old.
This is correct.
Have people talked about a slime associated with it before? I've never heard that.
This is the first time that this has come to light, so I don't know what to make of it.
When you see the trees bent like that, what do you think when you see them?
I think nothing, because it's not a definitive indication that this is the mark of a Sasquatch. I mean, we see trees bent over all over the Pacific Northwest, and it's thunderstorm.
So you're not going to completely endorse somebody just because you're into Sasquatch. You're going to debunk the theory if you don't...
The bottom line is we're searching for the truth.
Okay,
well, let's continue with Skip's story, because, okay, so you've got the trees bent over, and everybody else say, fine, there's lots of explanations for that. Then you hear this noise, this pounding noise.
I heard a pounding that sounds just like when a contractor is framing a house in a neighborhood. Just a continual bang, 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 3 times in a row. And it sounded so man-made that I headed toward the sound to see if I could see who the maker of the sound was. And it was so dense in the area where I was hiking. This is not a well-traveled trail for human backpackers to be out and going around. It's very densely wooded
and very rugged. You can see that in your home video.
Right. And I continued on up the hillside to see if I could see where the sound was coming from. And I couldn't see anyone up there. It was so thick that I finally just said, hey, you on the hill, to see what would happen. And the next thing I knew, this big black hairy mass comes rolling down the hillside toward me.
How big? When you say a big black hairy mass, what are you talking about?
The only thing I could think was it's a bear. Because it looked like it was about the size of a grizzly bear or a large black bear.
Okay, so that's what I'm thinking.
That's
why
what I'm
isn't
thinking,
it a bear?
right.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why are you staying there to find out what it is?
I didn't have a lot of choices because the trail that I was traveling on, there was only one way back down, and that was the way I had come up the trail because the trail didn't continue on in a loop.
So then you find out it's not a bear, though. It begins to stand up, right?
It actually fell down to the trail where I was standing and laid there unconscious for about 30 to 45 seconds.
Now, this is sort of you reenacting how it stood up?
Yeah, right. That's how I reenacted it right there for this film footage. But as it rolled down the hill, I could hear it kind of make a muffling groan as it fell head over heels, and it was grabbing for everything on the way down. And then it just landed there in the heap, and it wasn't moving, so I figured it was probably dead or unconscious, and now was my chance to get away.
So when it stood up and you saw this thing, what did you see?
It's totally undescribable. It had jet black hair about 3 inches long over all of its body, and it grew in kind of a cape on the back of its head down about 18 to 24 inches to the middle of its back. And also off the front of its face, it grew from the bridge of its nose in a long, continuous beard about to the middle of its chest.
But the muscle you describe on this is something I've never heard.
The muscle bundles, it looked like I was looking at Arnold Schwarzenegger's back there, only in 3.5 to 4 foot wide measurements.
Okay, now if I saw this, I'd be thinking, how do I get out of there, or do I have a weapon, or what can I do? What do you do?
I had a .22 caliber pistol.
Oh, that's just going to make him mad.
And I thought, just like you said, if I shot that thing, he'd tear me to pieces. So I thought my only choice would be to fire a shot over its head and to its right shoulder, and hopefully it would scare it down the trail if it was a wild animal. And if it was a man in a suit, of course, there's another possibility. He would have said, hey, don't shoot. But all he did was kind of glance over his shoulder and walk down the trail out of sight like I wasn't even there.
Okay, so you've got all of this family with you on the trip. Did anybody but you see this?
Only I.
What did they think when you told them the story?
Various reactions. Bear. A lot of my relatives think it's a bear. A lot of my relatives wanted to go back right away and make sure that it wasn't a bear, go see if they could find footprints.
But this sort of chased you, banging a rock. It kept banging it, which doesn't sound like a bear.
Well, after it disappeared down around the corner of this trail, I figured, well, if it's a wild animal, it's probably gone, and I'll have a way of getting off the hillside. So I followed in the direction that this thing left, and it was crouched down at the end of the trail doing something. It looked like it was digging. And because I had other family members with me, I thought, well, maybe it's killed one of them and it's trying to bury him here. And then I got worried about it, what's my responsibility here? So I started to walk toward it to see if I could see what it was doing. And it glanced over its shoulder at me again, picked up a boulder the size of a basketball, and beat it on the ground. And I backed up, and I got the heck out of there.
No wonder you had nightmares for such a long time.
And Betty, I know you've seen something very similar. We want to talk to you in just a second as well.
But now this is something we've never heard before. Listen to this tape. Can you hear that? Are they playing it yet? What is that roaring sound? We're going to meet the woman who says those are the screams of Sasquatch, and we're going to hear the rest of the recording.
Plus, a grandmother from B.C. will recall a strange sighting on the ski slopes when we get back. Welcome back to Northwest Afternoon. We're talking about sightings of mysterious creatures like Loch Ness, and Skip's just told us the story of how he came face to face with what he thinks is Bigfoot. And Stephen Harvey's in our audience, and you say you've actually smelled Bigfoot? Not face-to-face, but smelled it. What do you mean?
That's my conclusion. I have no other way to explain it.
What is it you smelled?
I smelled, by my favorite waterfall up Harrison Lake, an overpowering stink that's, the best way I can describe it is like a locker room after an athletic event. It was really strong, out in the middle of the woods.
How come it's not just a carcass of a dead animal in the woods?
Because I was right at the waterfall, right on the water, right on the walks. The water was like right here, rushing by. I should have just smelled the wonderful air of the waterfall, but it was just overpoweringly strong in a different way. And I didn't know what it was, but that's one of the motivating factors for starting this symposium. And as I would listen to other people speak about the experiences and hearing what it's supposed to smell like, that's my conclusion, that that's what it was.
And Sally, sitting next to you, you say you've actually heard Sasquatch. What do you mean you've heard Sasquatch? Where were you and what did you hear?
I was at my home, and I had left my two kids. I had gone out to dinner. And when I came back, they came running out and told me about the screams that was going on in a canyon next to where I live. And I couldn't explain what it was. Except
now, what area is this?
In Elma.
In Elma.
And I wasn't into Bigfoot then. And then about a year later, I heard, I was getting into Bigfoot, heard the tapes, and realized this is exactly what we heard.
So then you started to believe in Bigfoot. You, at the time when you heard it, you didn't think that's Bigfoot screaming
No, I had no idea what it was. It was something completely different.
I think everybody should make their own judgment on this. Let's take a listen to the recordings. Scared when you heard that?
Startled, I would say more was what we really were. It was a thing of trying to figure out what it could possibly be.
Now, Daniel, you've heard a lot here. I mean, you've heard smell, tapes. Any of this sticking with you in your research?
Well, the sounds, I mean, I don't know what to make of them. I've never heard of Sasquatch, so how am I to know what it's supposed to be?
But the smell, have you heard that story before?
The smell is a very common theme in all the reports. Rotten eggs, a sulfur smell, an overpowering stench. That's a very common theme in the
How about eyewitness account? I mean, you've got Skip here with an eyewitness account then.
Well, I can't say Skip didn't see something, but the overall mechanics of his report, and we've got thousands of reports here in North America, there's two things that are very disturbing to me. The fact that the individual shouted at the subject and it came falling or crashing down the hill, and the fact that he was chased by it. It's just not the signature of the Sasquatch, the sure-footed Sasquatch. And it's just like, it may be a valid report, but it's just like, I have my doubts.
Okay, Betty, what did you see? You say you saw Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Where were you and what did you see?
I was coming off of the ski hill, the Hemlock Valley ski hill, just out by Harrison, between Harrison and Chilliwack. My grandson was with me, and there was an S-turn in the road, so we were slowing right down, and then the head poked up over the side of the bank, and I said to my grandson, "Oh, look, Dallas, there's a a bear. And then I said, no, it's not a bear, it's standing up. And it went across the road. And
but bears stand up. I mean, I've seen
but
video.
they stand up and attack. They don't stand up just to get across the road.
And how tall is this?
Well, he was only between 5 and 6 feet tall. He wasn't that big.
So that's a little Sasquatch.
Yeah, it was.
So why do you think it was Sasquatch? Did you think that at the time when you saw it?
No, at first I thought it was my son being dressed in a gorilla suit, because that's something that he would do.
Just to scare you. I mean, it was so different that that's really what you thought.
Yeah, and that's what my grandson thought too. He says, there's probably a hell in a gorilla suit. But as it came across the road and jumped up an 8-foot bank and then walked along right beside the car, we were both peering out the window looking at it, and he did look back at us, and that's when we got a good look at his face.
Now, we've got some footage. I want you to look at this and see if this is kind of what you saw. Take a look at this. See it in the distance there?
You can see him. So I guess they've got it slow mode so you can hardly see him there in the woods. Is that the kind of look, Betty?
Well, I can't see it all that clearly, and him we could see clearly because he was right in the middle of the road.
Uh-huh. Skip, how about you? When you see this, I admit it is hard to see some of that. Does that look at all like what you saw?
Very similar to the lumbering gait that I saw when it took off. Yeah.
Is that a realistic film, Daniel?
Well, you've just seen 3 alleged pictures or photos, and I'm batting 3 for 3 that they're all fake.
What about what you have in your hand? What
this track here is a plaster of Paris casting.
If you could hold that up.
In this manner, that was collected in Northern California in 1959. Now, this track is about 16 inches long, hence the name Bigfoot. I'm 5 feet 7. My feet are 10 1/8 inch long. So this is my shoe alongside a track. So what we're dealing with is a very big primate.
How do we know somebody didn't just make up that cast?
We don't. We don't know if any of the reports here in North America are for real. That's why we're looking into the whole business.
You immediately dropped the film, so you bet those films aren't real. What kind of testing do you base that on?
One of them is, I know the individual who allegedly shot the picture. The other one is just too Hollywood for me. It just doesn't have the signature of someone making real footage in the heat of the moment. So it's just, you have this gut feeling about reports. And you have this, like, does that have a ring of truth to it? I've been doing it like a cop. You know, you listen to the depositions of witnesses and you say, like, well, this sounds okay and this doesn't sound
So a lot of it really has to do with the people. And I want to thank you both for coming in. And still ahead, a real-life Indiana Jones who actually risked his life traveling to this remote lake in search of a legendary beast.
And next, some folks who say our Northwest waters have their own version of the Loch Ness Monster. And they say they've captured the mystery monster on film. We'll be right back. Ted Danson chased after the legendary Loch Ness Monster on the TV miniseries that you're seeing right here. Hollywood's rendition of Nessie looks a lot like Creature Eyewitnesses accounts, actually, of this thing that's been spotted in British Columbia's Lake Okanagan for more than a century now. A lot of eyewitnesses, and such creatures are reported all over the world, from Scotland to BC. And our next guest, Redmond O'Hanlon, even traveled to the swamps of the Congo. You are a travel writer, and you really risked your own life going into some sort of treacherous territory to find out if you could find a creature that people there had been talking about for a long time.
MOKELE-MBEMBE, the dinosaur. It lives in Lake Tele. But something told me not to go directly to the lake, so in fact we went all over the northern forest before we got there. And I had a shrewd idea of what might be in the lake before we did get there. But when I first went, I thought in a naive Western way that there might be a big animal there. That there might be a Nile monitor, a big lizard, an undiscovered turtle perhaps. And the trigger
people had written about it? Is that why you thought that?
There's a bizarre book by a biochemist at the University of Chicago who'd written a book about it. But that's not the interesting bit. The appendix was what was interesting, written by a man called Marcel Anyanya, who I then sought out and took with me on this long trip. And he said he'd seen MOKELE-MBEMBE 400 yards out in Lake Tele.
And what did he see? Give me that description of what he saw.
The sun glinted on its black back and its brown head, and then it submerged. And unfortunately, his video camera, was set on macro at the time. But there were reports, supposedly pygmy reports, of a big animal in this lake. which indeed is the most extraordinary, numinous, wonderful lake when you come across it. It's the largest expanse of open water for 100 miles in every direction.
So why the pygmy bridge? Is that...
Well, the pygmy report has a certain authority. Like me, well, they're good, I'm an evangelical atheist, but they're really sort of natural atheists. They think that the forest is God and God is the forest. And by and large, their reports of a specific animal like that have always turned out to be true. The gorilla, the discovery of the gorilla, right up until 1912, the discovery of the big forest giraffe, the okapi, all came from pygmy stories.
So we didn't know about the gorilla or the giraffe until the pygmies, and it was based on those pygmy stories.
Yeah.
So when you hear about these pygmy reports, it validates it a little
bit. There might
bit.
be some big lizard in there.
You know, we heard about noises.
Well, the noises, that's the one consistent thing you hear in Brazzaville. You hear reports of these strange noises all over that area. People who visited the lake for a short time, or who don't live there. And when we finally got to this lake, the most beautiful lake I've ever seen, it really is, partly because you come out of the jungle. We were 6 months in the jungle, and the wonderful feeling of the great horizon, incredibly beautiful, and beautiful big antelope called Sitatunga, the swamp antelope, standing in the water and the sun beating up on their white stomachs. And we got in a little fishing canoe dugout had been made there with two big Bantu with me from the village of Boa. And I'd always wanted to get in amongst some chimpanzees, and we heard them calling. Lots of gorillas around there too. But we covered ourselves in mud and slithered forward on our stomachs through the wet swamp forest. Well, I got right underneath a big tree, and there was an old bald male in it. And I moved. I got bored watching him. He's eating leaves like. And he looked down, saw me, and went like this. It's the most disgusting thing he'd ever seen. And then I'm afraid to have to tell you, he stood up and urinated at me. Then he swung around and defecated.
So you didn't find quite the monster that you went out looking for.
You feel very, very unwelcome.
But I want you to hang with us, because I want you to tell people in a moment what you did find.
And Paul DeMar is here, and you found something. You actually got a shot of this thing, right?
Yeah,
on Lake Okanagan?
Had a chance to videotape something very interesting.
Take a look at that. Maybe you can describe what it is exactly you saw.
Where are we playing?
Go ahead.
So describe what you saw.
Basically, what looked like waves on the water, as though something was swimming underneath the water and creating a wake. I've never seen anything quite like it before. There's a lot of boats in the lake, a lot of water skiers, and I've never seen this particular pattern of waves. And you see a boat come by here, and it looks like they ski right over whatever's under the water. No. And
I don't know. I don't want to be skiing over that.
But it keeps on moving.
That's right. And there's something that looks like it's making the water basically create some waves.
So, but that's not saying that there's a monster in Lake Okanagan just by seeing that.
No, because you can't actually see anything above the water per se.
Right.
And,
so the mystery continues.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a quick break. Coming up, what about the seas surrounding our home? A man who says you may want to watch where you swim around here.
And we'll find out what Redmond actually discovered in his search for that dinosaur-like beast.
If you're 100 or more pounds overweight, you're not...
We filmed in this area up near Vancouver, and in it, Mark Harmon finds, similar to what Paul just described, something underneath the water that turns out to be a very Hollywood-looking creature. And Paul is on the phone now. Paul LeBlanc, you saw something that they call catty. What is that? You there, Paul?
Paul, are you on the phone with us? Because catty is the nickname for, what is it, Cataborosaurus or something like that? I know they keep saying he's there, but I can't hear him at all.
Yeah.
So, you know what, I'm going to go to you, Redmond, because while we want to talk to him, because that's just another thing that's supposed to be swimming by the Strait of Juan de Fuca. I want to find out, did you ever find this dinosaur-like creature in the Congo? What did you find?
Well, what I found was, depends upon this old chimpanzee partly. He got up and two saplings beside him on the bough, and he grabbed them. And he shook them, and he went, "Ooh-wah!" only much louder. And then all the other chimpanzees join in. Great big male chimps come towards you through the foliage. And then I thought, these apes are big, patronizing. Then I thought, yeah, but what about Jane Goodall's account of chimps' idea of really good day out? You grab a colobus or a guenon monkey by the back legs and smash its brains out in a tree and eat it. And the huge chimps moving across the forest floor behind me, slapping the the mud and the leaves on the floor with appalling violence.
So basically what you're saying you found...
Impressive display. Now, when we got back to base camp, I like words like that, but where we would camp the other end of the lake, a young guy I had with me, both of them, said, who were visitors like me to the area, Bantu, said, did you hear it? And I said, hear what? And he said, MOKELE-MBEMBE. He called this afternoon. We heard it. We're not going to live to buy the bicycles with the money you'll give us. And I said, but you heard what? And he said, ooh. And I realized if I was Einstein and just discovered E equals MC squared, that the call of MOKELE-MBEMBE that will drive a man berserk is the sound of chimpanzees across open water when they're displaying a passing leopard or whatever. Every sound is distorted in this space. Now, we're used to it, but nobody living there is, because every sound is muffled in the jungle.
You killed the myth.
Oh, boy.
No, but not just that. I didn't kill the myth. For me, well, I thought I was going to arrive 67 million years too late after one of God's little incoming bricks blew up the Yucatan Peninsula and eradicated the dinosaurs and all these monsters we're talking about. But this old man in a leaf loincloth said to me, look, don't be ridiculous. If it was a real animal in the lake, we're the fishermen. We come here every 2 weeks. We'd know about it. That's not the kind of animal it is. It's an animal mystère, an animal of the imagination. It exists because we imagine it.
Paul, I think we have on the phone. Paul, are you there? No, he's not there.
The monster's got it.
The monster has
Paul.
him.
Daddy's got Paul.
Guest or myth? You be the judge. Yeah, what about, we were trying to talk to Arlene, too, quickly. Is Arlene on the phone? Is she on the phone?
Yes, right here.
Hi, Arlene. Arlene is a photojournalist who has written this book on OGOPOGO, and you say you've spotted, actually, OGOPOGO. What is OGOPOGO, and what did you see?
Well, actually, I've been a researcher and writer of the subject for the past 20 years, and I was out checking a sighting that occurred around Okanagan Lake Bridge, and attending the lake without any expectations of seeing anything. And after I checked out the details of Paul Stasiuk's sighting, I was about to get in my car and leave, and when suddenly, the only way I can describe this is that if you can imagine seeing a World War II sub suddenly surfacing or breaking water.
And you know what?
That's exactly what I saw.
Arlene, we're going to have to leave it at that. And this mystery may never be solved, but thank you for joining us, and thank you all for at least shedding some light on some of the mysteries of the deep. We'll be back.
All we need is one.
Redmond O'Hanlon's book, No Mercy, A Journey to the Heart of the Congo, is available at local bookstores. Mr. O'Hanlon will be reading from his book tonight at 8 o'clock at Seattle's Elliott Bay Bookstore. For more information about the International Sasquatch Symposium June 6th through the 8th at Macmillan Planetarium in Vancouver, British Columbia, call 604-321-0410. And if you'd like to know more about Sasquatch-related special events, festivals, or souvenirs, contact the Pacific Northwest Bigfoot Society at 800-548-YETI. That's 800-548-9384.
Hey, we'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Bye-bye.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.